The Coniston massacre, which took place from the 14th of August to the 18th of October 1928 near the Coniston cattle station in Northern Territory, Australia, was the last known officially sanctioned massacre of Indigenous Australians and one of the last events of the Australian Frontier Wars. People of the Warlpiri and Matyerimkatage groups were killed. The massacre occurred in revenge for the death of dingo hunter Frederick Brooks, killed by Aboriginal people in August 1928 at a place now known as Ukuru. Official records at the time stated that 31 people were killed. The owner of Coniston Station, Randall Stafford, was a member of the punitive party for the first few days and estimated that at least twice that number were killed between the 14th of August and 1 September. Historians estimate that at least 60 and as many as 110 Aboriginal men, women and children were killed. The Warlpiri and Matyerimkatage believe that up to 170 died between the 14th of August and the 18th of October. Background: for administrative reasons, from 1927 to 1931, the federal government divided the Northern Territory into North and Central Australia. By July 1928, Central Australia was in its fourth year of a particularly severe drought with fewer than 25 millimeters of rain falling in the previous 7 months. Overgrazing by stock had denuded the country of its vegetation, leaving little feed for wildlife. Waterholes were drying up and even the most experienced Aboriginal people were finding game and water almost unobtainable. Almost all the permanent waterholes and soaks were on station properties, and as Aboriginal people began to die from thirst and hunger, they moved to the stations for the water, where they became in aggravation by begging for food and spearing cattle. The pastoralists chased the Aboriginal people away from their water to ensure the survival of their cattle. 67-year-old Fred Brooks had worked as a station hand on Randall Stafford's Coniston Station, 240 miles northwest of Alice Springs, since the end of World War I, but due to the drought had not been paid for some time. In July 1928 he bought 2 camels and on the 2nd of August, left with 2 12-year-old Aboriginal children, Skipper and Dodger, to trap dingoes for the Tens bounty on their scalps. Approaching a soak 14 miles from the homestead, he found around 30 Ngalia Warlpiri people camped. Brooks knew some and decided to camp with them. The first 2 days were uneventful and Brooks caught several dingoes. On the 4th of August, Charlton Young and a companion who were exploring the area for a mining company stopped by and warned Brooks that the Aboriginal people had been getting cheeky lately by visiting the mining camps heavily armed, demanding food and tobacco. Brooks had been approached several times to trade but had so far refused. On the 6th of August, Bullfrog with his wife Marangali asked him to trade and Brooks offered some food in exchange for Marangali washing his clothes. Bullfrog camped nearby but Brooks neither paid him the promised food nor did he return his wife. In the morning Bullfrog became enraged when he found his wife in bed with Brooks and attacked him, severing an artery in his throat with his boomerang. Bullfrog, his uncle Padirka and Marangali then beat Brooks to death. Aboriginal elders fearfully banished Bullfrog and Padirka and ordered Brooks' 2 boys to return to the homestead and say that he had died of natural causes. The following day an Aboriginal person named Alex Wilson camped at the now deserted sook and finding the body rode back to the station, where he described hysterically how Brooks had been chopped up by 40 Aboriginal people and the parts stuffed in a rabbit burrow. Randall Stafford had been in Alice Springs requesting police to attend to prevent the spearing of his cattle. He returned to be told of the murder and dismemberment of Brooks but chose to wait for the police. No one returned to the sook and no one attempted to retrieve the body. On the 11th of August, the government resident J.C. Carwood sent Constable William Murray, the officer in charge at Barrow Creek who also held the post of Chief Protector of Aborigines, to Coniston to investigate the complaints of cattle spearing. Told of the murder, Murray drove back to Alice Springs and telephoned Carwood, who refused to send reinforcements, telling Murray to deal with the Aboriginal people as he saw fit. Returning to Coniston, Murray questioned Dodger and Skipper, who described the circumstances of the murder and named Bullfrog, Padirka and Marangali as the killers. According to his own report, Murray also obtained the names of 20 accomplices. Murray organized a posse consisting of Tracker Paddy, Alex Wilson, Dodger, Tracker Major, Randall Stafford and 2 white itinerants, Jack Saxby and Billy Briscoe. Massacre. Brooks was killed on or about the 7th of August 1928, and his body was partly buried in a rabbit hole in the Northern Territory. No eyewitnesses to the actual murder were ever identified, and there are conflicting accounts of the discovery of the body and subsequent events. On the 15th of August, dingo trapper Bruce Chapman arrived at Coniston, and Murray sent Chapman, Paddy and Alex Wilson to the Soak to find out what happened. The 3 buried Brooks on the bank of the Soak. In the afternoon, 2 Warlpiri, Paddinggar and Woollingar arrived at Coniston to trade dingo scalps. Believing them to be involved with the murder, Paddy arrested them, but Woollingar slipped his chains and attempted to escape. Murray fired at Woollingar and he fell with a bullet wound to the head. Stafford then kicked him in the chest, breaking a rib. Woollingar was then chained to a tree for the next 18 hours. The next morning the posse, with Paddinggar and Woollingar following on foot in chains, set out for the Lander River, where they found a camp of 23 Warlpiri at Nundaru. With the posse encircling the camp, Murray rode in and was surrounded by Aboriginal people yelling. Briscoe started shooting, with Saxby and Murray joining in. 3 men and a woman, Bullfrog's wife Marangali, were killed, with another woman dying from her wounds an hour later. A search of the camp turned up articles belonging to Brooks. Stafford was furious with Murray over the shooting and the next morning returned to Coniston alone. During the night, Murray captured 3 young boys who had been sent by their tribe to find what the police party was doing. Murray had the boys beaten to force them to lead the party to the rest of the Warlpiri, but had they done so, they would have been punished by their tribe. To resolve the dilemma, the 3 boys smashed their own feet with rocks. Despite the injuries, Murray forced the now crippled boys to lead the party. By nightfall they reached Cockatoo Creek, where they sighted 4 Aboriginal people on a ridge. Paddy and Murray captured 2, but one ran, with Murray firing several shots at him which missed. Paddy then knelt and fired a single shot, hitting the fleeing man in the back and killing him instantly. After questioning the other 3 and finding they had no connection with the murder, Murray released them. The next 2 days saw no contact with Aboriginal people at all, as word had spread, with many Aboriginal people heading into the desert, preferring to risk dying of thirst, rather than face the police patrol. Returning to Coniston, Murray left Paddinggar, Woollingar and one of the 3 boys, 11-year-old Lollabra, whose crushed feet had become infected, in Stafford's custody before heading north to continue the search. Following tracks, the patrol came upon a camp of 20 Warlpiri, mostly women and children. Approaching the camp, Murray ordered the men to drop their weapons. Not understanding English, the women and children fled while the men stood their ground to protect them. The patrol opened fire, killing 3 men. 3 injured died later of their wounds, and an unknown number of wounded escaped. By Murray's account, he met 4 separate groups of Warlpiri, and in each case was obliged to shoot in self-defense, a total of 17 casualties. He later testified under oath that each one of the dead was a murderer of Brooks. The Warlpiri themselves estimated between 60 and 70 people had been killed by the patrol. On the 24th of August, Murray captured an Aboriginal person named Arkirkra and returned to Coniston, where he collected Paddinggar and then marched the 240 miles to Alice Springs. Arriving on the 1st of September, Arkerkra and Padigar were charged with the murder of Brooks, while Murray was hailed as a hero. On the 3rd of September, Murray set off for Pine Hill Station to investigate complaints of cattle spearing. Nothing has been recorded about this patrol, but he returned on the 13th of September with 2 prisoners. On the 16th of September, Henry Tillmouth of Napperby Station shot and killed an Aboriginal people he was chasing away from the homestead. This incident was included in the later inquiry. On the 19th, Murray again departed, this time under orders to investigate a non-fatal attack on the person of a settler, William Nugget Morton, at Broadmeadows Station by what Morton described as a group of 15-mile Warlpiri people who were also in the same area. Morton, a former circus wrestler, had a reputation for his sexual exploitation of Aboriginal women and violence against both his white employees and Aboriginal people. On the 27th of August, he left his camp to punish Aboriginal people for spearing his cattle. At Boomerang Waterhole he found a large Warlpiri camp. What happened here is unknown, but the Warlpiri decided to kill Morton. During the night they surrounded his camp, and at dawn 15 men armed with boomerangs and yamsticks rushed Morton. His dogs attacked the Aboriginal people, and after breaking free Morton shot one and the rest fled. Morton returned to his main camp and was taken to the Tea Tree Well Mission, where a nurse removed 17 splinters from his head and treated him for a serious skull fracture. From the station, on the 24th of September, a party consisting of Murray, Morton and half-castes Alex Wilson and Jack Cusick, embarked on a series of encounters. At Tomahawk Waterhole 4 were killed, while at Circle Well 1 was shot dead and Murray killed another with an axe. They then moved east to the Hanson River, where another 8 were shot. Morton identified all of them as his attackers. The party now returned to Broadmeadows to replenish their supplies before traveling north. No records of this patrol were kept. According to the Warlpiri, this patrol encountered Aboriginal people at Dingo Hole, where they killed 4 men and 11 women and children. The Warlpiri also recount how the patrol charged a robbery at Tipinbor, rounding up a large number of Aboriginal people like cattle before cutting out the women and children and shooting all the men. There is anecdotal evidence that there were up to 100 killed in total at the 5 sites. Constable Murray was back in Alice Springs on the 18th of October, where he was asked to write an official report on the police actions. The report was only several lines long. He wrote, "Incidents occurred on an expedition with William John Morton. Unfortunately, drastic action had to be taken and resulted in a number of male natives being shot. No mention was made of the number killed, the circumstances of the shootings or where they occurred. Trial of 2 Aboriginal people. The trial of Arkerkra and Padigar for Brooks' murder took place in Darwin on 7 and 8 November before Justice Mallon. The first witness was 12-year-old Lollibra, who testified in detail that he saw Arkerkra, Padigar and Marangali kill Brooks. He also testified that all the Aboriginal people that had helped them were now dead." Constable Murray took the stand next, his evidence becoming so involved in justifying his own actions in killing suspects that Justice Mallon reminded him that he himself was not on trial, and to avoid facts not relevant to the guilt of the accused, the court then adjourned for lunch. The verdict was a foregone conclusion, as all that remained was the reading of the confessions made by the accused in Alice Springs. Despite lunch for the jurors being provided by the local hotel, 2 of the jurors went home to eat. A furious Justice Mallon dismissed the jury, ordered a new jury be impaneled and a new trial to be convened the following day. The new trial began with Lollibra being asked to repeat his evidence. This time his evidence, although still maintaining that the accused were the murderers, was completely contradictory. Under cross-examination, it became apparent within minutes that he had been coached on what to say. When the prosecution tried to introduce the written confessions of the accused, Justice Mallin pointed out that as the accused had been charged by a South Australian rather than Central Australian magistrate, he would disallow the statements. The prosecution declined to call the accused to testify. Murray took the stand next, angering Justice Mallin when he repeated his justifications for killing suspects. The judge remarked, "It appears impossible for all those bands of natives to be associated with the murder of Brooks. It looks as if they were shot down at different places just to teach them and other Aborigines a lesson, with no evidence of guilt presented." Justice Mallin ordered the jury to acquit the accused. During his testimony, Murray said that the group had shot to kill. Justice Mallin: Constable Murray, was it really necessary to shoot to kill in every case? Could you not have occasionally shot to wound? Murray: No, Your Honor. What is the use of a wounded black fellow hundreds of miles from civilization? Justice Mallin: How many did you kill? Murray: 17, Your Honor. Justice Mallin: You mean you mowed him down wholesale? The Northern Territory Times, the 9th of November 1928. In the courtroom to hear this and other evidence of massacre was Athol McGregor, a Central Australian missionary. He passed on his concern to church leaders, and eventually to William Morley, outspoken and influential advocate of the Association for the Protection of Native Races, who did the most to secure a judicial inquiry. The federal government was also under considerable pressure to act. The British media had been reporting on Australia's treatment of Aboriginal people. A federal election was due on the 17th of November and the League of Nations had publicly criticised the case. During the trial, Murray was billeted with the Northern Territory Police. Although Murray officially admitted to only 17 deaths, Constable Victor Hall said he was shocked with Murray's freely expressed opinions of what was good enough for a blackfellow, and claimed he bragged to fellow officers that he had killed closer to 70 than 17. Board of Inquiry. The Board of Inquiry was presided over by Police Magistrate A.H. O'Kelly and was deeply compromised from the start, its 3 members being hand-picked to maximize damage control. J.C. Carwood, government resident in Central Australia, and Murray's immediate superior, being one of them. Carwood revealed his own disposition in a letter to his departmental secretary shortly after the massacre. Trouble has been brewing for some time, and the safety of the white man could only be assured by drastic action on the part of the authorities. I am firmly of the opinion that the result of the recent action by the police will have the right effect upon the natives. The board sat for 18 days in January 1929 to consider 3 incidents that resulted in the deaths of Aboriginal people, and in one more day, finished its report, finding that 31 Aboriginal people had been killed and that in each case the death was justified. The hearing decided, in the face of indubitable evidence to the contrary, that there had been no drought in Central Australia, evidence of ample native food and water supplies and thus no mitigation for cattle spearing. A journalist for the Adelaide Register News who travelled with the board during its tour of Central Australia to determine the claims of drought, reported, 5 years of drought have burnt every blade of grass from the plains and left a wilderness of red sand. The wonder is that any living thing survives. Every settler visited by the board had lost between 60 to 80% of his stock to the drought this year alone. The day after this report was published, a settler replied in the letters to the editor that the drought made the life of one ewe worth more to Australia than all the blacks that were ever here. Carwood expressed his satisfaction with the outcome in his annual report for 1929, writing, "The evidence of all the witnesses was conclusive. The board found that the shooting was justified, and that the natives killed were all members of the Walmulla tribe from Western Australia, who were on a marauding expedition, with the avowed object of wiping out the white settlers." Following his appointment, O'Kelly had stated his intention that the inquiry would not be a whitewash, and it is speculated he had been got it to take up his appointment. O'Kelly travelled by train from Canberra to Melbourne with Prime Minister Stanley Bruce, who was campaigning for the upcoming election with the White Australia policy as his party's main platform, accompanying him. O'Kelly later said that had he known how the inquiry would turn out, he would have refused the appointment, stating that if the same circumstances happened again, someone would be hanged for the killings. Reporting on the inquiry, the Adelaide Register News wrote, "He, Murray, is the hero of Central Australia. He is the policeman of fiction. He rides alone and always gets his man." The Northern Territory Times announced that the police were wholly exonerated, and that there was not a scintilla of evidence to support the view that the police had conducted a reprisal or punitive expedition. Aftermath: Constable Murray was quietly removed from his position and moved to Adelaide, where he died in the 1960s. William Morton moved out of the area several years after the massacre. Bullfrog was never arrested and moved to Yuendumu, where he died of old age in the 1970s. One of the few survivors was Gwoya Jungarai, who left the area after the massacre destroyed his family. A later picture of him as £1 Jimmy became an iconic Australian postage stamp. Billy Stockman Tipalt Jara, a prominent Papunya Tula painter, was a survivor of the massacre. His father was away hunting and survived while his mother had hidden him in a Coolaman under a bush before being shot and killed. The strong oral history established after the massacre is recorded in paintings by some Indigenous artists, and the Warlpiri and Matjia and Katage refer to the period as the killing times. Similarly, other massacres that have occurred in the Ord River region have been recorded by Warman artists such as Rover Thomas.